Hello and welcome to this special broadcast of Creation Research Evidence News, coming at you live from the Creation Research Centre. The headlines this evening: Trilobite eyes inspire bifocal lenses. Limping, lumping Sore-asaurs, evidence of diseased and damaged dinosaurs in the fossil record. A shark toothache. Skydiving Salamanders. And finally, Parrots defy the forbidden phenotype. Well, hello and welcome to this special broadcast of Creation Research Evidence News, coming at you live from the Creation Research Centre. I'm Joseph Hubbard.
And I'm Diane Eager.
And we're here in person.
Yes,
both of us together. Hello.
Yes,
this isn't some sort of
yes.
camera trickery. You've actually come all the way over from Australia, and we've spent a good few days with you actually going around and doing some stuff.
Yes, we've had a fascinating time down in the museum looking at fossils and artefacts and all sorts of wonderful things.
We've done some good trips around and taken some photographs. And in fact, one of the news items today, the Trilobite one, our first news item in fact, we've actually been taking some pretty cool photographs, and you'll be able to see some of those in just a moment. So, it's been busy times here at Creation Research. Lots has been going on. We'll bring you some news and updates about that as well. But Diane, let's start with our first news headline here. Trilobite eyes inspire bifocal lenses. What is going on here?
Yes. Well, trilobites are probably one of the most recognisable fossils. Everyone recognises dinosaurs, but mainly from their reconstructions rather than their bones.
Sure.
But in terms of actual fossils, most people recognise trilobites. There are lots of them around. Lots of people own them. So they're very popular as fossils. We have some in the Creation Research Collection. This is one from the Creation Research Collection in Brisbane. And they have these wonderful eyes that are made of multiple facets, so that if you look up close to them, you can see there are lots and lots of eyes, or little eye facets. Now, this is one of the ones we looked at yesterday.
It is indeed, yes.
Down in the museum
absolutely.
Here. Yes. And they have those same faceted eyes. They're rather brilliant, aren't they?
And in fact, these are ones that just earlier today we pulled up and put under a special microscope and tried to think. So let's see if we can have a look at some of these pictures now, and you can see how they're just so brilliantly and intricately designed, these little teeny tiny eyes. Really
tiny, weeny little eyes, yes. And you can see they're actually made up of two parts. So this is a micro photograph of the two parts going through the centre of the eye, and you can see it's made up of two parts. Now, the reason for that is because if you want to see things that are close up to you, you need to have a short focal range, a bit like your own bifocal glasses. Now, you're not old enough to wear bifocals, but I am, all right? I wear bifocals, so I have a section in my glasses
I can see it there, yes.
Close-up vision, and then the rest of the lens is for far-away vision. Now, there's a bit of a problem with that, and this is one of the frustrations of advancing in years, when your eyes no longer function as best as they can. When you want to look at things close up, the rest of the world goes blurry, and that's called depth of field. Now, it can be used to some good extent in photography. This is often used. Do you recognise that? We've gone off trilobites now. This is a living thing. This is a beautiful orchid. Now, it's a tiny, weeny little orchid. It's only as the middle of that is less than the size of your thumb. So
oh, wow, okay, right.
Really small. If you want to take a photo of that, you can get a nice, clear, close-up view of it, but look what happens to the background. It all goes blurry. So that's the problem of depth of field. Now, it's nice in photography, but if you're doing something like scientific surveillance where you want to look at, say, a forest or a landscape or something like that, and you want to be able to look at small individual parts of that, but you also want to see the big picture at once, you have to switch between bifocals from close-up view to far-away view. So it's a bit of a problem. But it seems the trilobites have solved that by having that two-part eye.
Sure.
So they have one part for the close-up, one part for the far-away. Anyway, some scientists looked at these and thought, well, we need to design something that will do the same thing, right? Be very compact, have a part to look at the close-up view, have a part to look at the far-away view. And they got together with some engineers and some other technologists, and they came up with it. And this is part of what they wrote in their paper. Now notice their first sentence there, inspired by compound eyes of the trilobite, they designed and constructed, and then they had a whole lot of technical details about this thing that they designed. But basically what it was a camera system that would focus on close things and far away objects at the same time, so you didn't have to go switching from one to the other.
Of course.
And then they thought we can even improve on that. We can look at the middle distance things at the same time as well. And so they came up with a computer algorithm that was able to compare the long distance and the short range things and to get the mid distance objects into focus. So very, very useful camera system. But notice how they started off, inspired by compound eyes. They thought, wow, this is an amazing piece of technology, even if it's in a fossil. And they started there. Now, if you are inspired, you are acknowledging that something outside of yourself, something greater than yourself, has somehow done something that is cleverer than what you can do.
Absolutely. So we're definitely looking at evidence of design here, really, aren't we?
We're certainly looking at evidence of design. And so by admitting, and in fact they use the word design, and you'll find that quite a lot in scientific papers. If you back an evolutionist into a corner, they will say, oh, no, there's no evidence for design. Then they write papers and use the word design because there's no other word to use.
It's
what they've seen. Yes.
But there we go.
Yes.
Great stuff. Well, the museum project here in the UK and around the world, in fact, is really taking off. Jurassic Ark in Australia needs your help after flooding and stuff has happened. So be prepared to help and support that. There's some great new discoveries from Jurassic Ark. And in fact, I believe very shortly our Tasmanian rep from our Tasmanian Museum project is coming over to Queensland. So if you're watching this in Queensland, make sure you go and find out the details on creationresearch.net, the Craig Hawkins and John Mackay conference time, which will allow you to go and get involved with them and go and see Jurassic Ark and everything else as well. But things are really happening here in the UK as well, and very shortly we will be putting out some rather spectacular news. And in particular, Diane, we've spent most of today going around the museum filming sort of an impromptu chat about some of the evidence that is on show here. And did you enjoy that?
Oh, it was fabulous. Really enjoyed it.
It was a great time of being able to take Diane round, but also be able to share her knowledge with me and some of the wonderful stuff that you've learnt over the years and some of the stuff that I've learnt over the years, and actually put it out on display in a programme which should be coming to you fairly shortly. So keep an eye out for that. But moving on to our next topic, limping, lumping Sore-asaurs. So we're looking, in fact, I think we're looking over the next sort of three headlines of evidence of diseased and damaged dinosaurs and ancient creatures. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. We're talking about a new and burgeoning scientific discipline called paleopathology.
Oh, lovely.
Yes. Diseased fossils.
Great stuff.
Great stuff. Yes, as we've got newer and newer techniques for studying fossils, which has been fantastic for creation research because we're finding more and more evidence of design. We're finding more and more evidence of God's handiwork in the world. And we have these wonderful means of scanning fossils so that you don't have to destroy them to see what's inside them. and we're finding all sorts of really interesting things.
Fantastic.
So we have a few stories of paleopathology here, and 3 of them relate to dinosaurs. And so when we sent this out in the newsletter, John Mackay came up with this headline, actually, Limping, Lumping, Sore-asaurs. Good play on words, but fun. But the first one was about a limping dinosaur. And this was not an actual fossil in terms of a bone. What they found were trace fossils, which are evidence that an animal or plant has been there, and it's left its impression on the surrounding matrix. And so in this case, it was footprints.
Dinosaur footprints.
Oh, dinosaur footprints.
Always
yes, that's right. So we found a dinosaur trackway, and they... scientists looked at this trackway, and they found that the left and the right foot weren't quite the same. The left foot seemed to have a deformity in it, whereas the right foot was a bit more like a classic dinosaur footprint. That there are several of these all over the world. You've probably seen some.
Of course.
And by looking at footprints, you can actually tell quite a lot about how a creature moves and also how its foot is structured. So they looked at these footprints. Now, this is a false colour, of course. They don't come in those bright colours. But what you can do is you can make sort of very careful laser scans of them, get very precise measurements.
I believe the colours probably show different sort of depths of the footprint and stuff as well.
Right.
So you get an idea almost. You're almost taking a 2D picture and turning it 3D, with gives you depth perception as well.
Right.
So
it's a useful technique for analysing the actual shape of the foot itself, and also it gives you an idea of the movement that's involved in terms of how the foot is digging into the matrix that it's walking on. So having done that, they came up with these results. The left foot had this sort of deformity where one of the toes just wasn't quite right. It was bent over and really wasn't making proper contact with the ground, whereas the right foot was a classic dinosaur footprint with 3 toes like they normally have. So what they concluded with after they'd done all of their analysis was that this was the trackway made by a theropod dinosaur, probably about 6 to 7 metres long, right? That's based on what we know about theropod dinosaurs. Okay, it was probably walking at about 4 kilometres per hour, which is a reasonable walking pace. But it must have walked with a distinct limp because of that deformed foot, because that each footprint of the left foot had that consistent deformed pattern, so it was probably limping along.
Now, can I just clarify something here, Diane? Because obviously there's a number of famous instances in paleontology where scientists perhaps have gone a little bit too far in their description. So a classic one is Nebraska Man, where they've taken a single tooth, reconstructed an entire hominid from it, where in reality it was a pig tooth, right? Now, some of our viewers may be looking at this and say, well, hang on a minute, we're just dealing with footprints. How on earth did they work out that it was a theropod dinosaur 67 metres long walking at this speed? But this is all genuine science we're doing here. There's things we can learn from the footprints. There's things we can compare with what we know from dinosaur skeletons about sizes and footprints and stuff. So really this is probably yes, there's going to be interpretation in here, but it's a fairly reasonable interpretation. We're actually doing real science when we're describing this as a theropod dinosaur. Is that correct?
Yes. In this case, we've dug up lots of theropod dinosaurs. We know what their feet look like. We know what sort of footprints they should make. So we're putting it into its context. The problem with Nebraska Man was, this was back in the 1920s when this was fairly early on. And I remember seeing the pictures, the reconstructions in an old copy of, I think it was the London Evening News or something like that. It was a magazine. And they had this picture of this ape-like creature with its family all sitting around, and they had reconstructed this whole thing out of just one small specimen. And when they found other specimens in their proper context, and that's the important point that you were making, this does need to be put into its context. So these conclusions here are reasonable because they are put into a context that we already have.
Absolutely. Just thought we'd clarify that, but do carry on.
Good point. Needs to be made. Yes, all right. So the next one is another iconic dinosaur, the Triceratops.
Oh, yes.
And this one is in a bit of trouble because it's got a hole in its bony frill. Now, don't you love this name, Triceratops horridus?
Horridus.
That's right. And especially if it's been found in a place called Hell Creek. I mean, you couldn't make it up. It sounds
it's
like
a horrid three-horned creature from Hell Creek. That sounds
right. Sounds like a low-grade horror movie.
Yeah, it does.
Yes. Anyway, they did find that it had a hole in its bony frill, so there was something wrong with this. Now, sometimes that happens after a fossil has been buried. After all, even in the process of digging them up, no matter how careful they are, you are a bit fragile. But they could tell that this hole was actually there before the dinosaur died, because again, we now have these wonderful microscopy techniques where we can look at their bones, and you could see signs of inflammation and of healing bone. Now, those things do leave a distinctive pattern in bones that have been damaged and then have been starting to heal. And so they saw that in this bone. So the dinosaur must have been alive when this injury happened, and it had started to heal, and they suspect it was probably about 6 months before the dinosaur eventually met its fate.
Sure.
And so this was their conclusion. It was a traumatic event which must have occurred during combat with another Triceratops.
Wow.
Now this is where we have gone off the rails.
Yes.
The traumatic event, yes, because there are signs of bony trauma and healing bone. Now we know what that looks like, but no one saw this dinosaur fighting with anything.
So that's just pure interpretation. It could have been that. It could have been 100 other different things.
That's right. Could have run into a tree.
Exactly.
Could have been a clumsy clot and fallen over.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. But everyone likes to think of dinosaurs as being fierce, fighting creatures. Now, in fact, Triceratops was a vegetarian. But the standard story is that it has this big frill in order to protect it from other things that want to come and bite things out of it. But an equally good theory is that bony frills are actually very good for thermoregulation and also for display. And we see that in living creatures these days.
Peacocks, for example, is a classic
that's
example.
right, yes. And crocodiles and very large reptiles like that have bony plates in them. They're good for thermoregulation in terms of the blood supply goes through the surface of the skin, soaks up heat, because reptiles, being cold-blooded or ectothermic, right, they get their heat from outside. It's a very useful thing to have.
Great stuff.
Yes. And then finally, we have a story about a dinosaur with a sore throat. Now, if you've had a sore throat, yes, it's a pretty miserable experience.
Yeah.
So
I wouldn't like to have a 30-foot long
sore throat. That size would be a very, very miserable experience, wouldn't it? Yes. So what was found here was some neck bones from a long-necked sauropod. So that's one of the classic, Brontosaurus
the big
type,
titanosaur ones,
type dinosaur with the very long neck, and it was found in Montana and dated as late Jurassic, so about 150 million years ago. And what they found were some unusual bony protrusions. Now again, we can have a close look into the internal structure of these bones, and they found these unusual bony protrusions in a place that probably could have been penetrated by air sacs. There is a theory that dinosaur bones had hollow spaces in them to make them lighter, even though they're still strong, just like, a bit like tubular steel. It's hollow in the middle, but it's very strong. And they found these interesting sort of bony protrusions or bony distortions, and they are similar to bony changes that happen in reptiles and birds these days, and they're caused by a fungal infection called Aspergillus. And so it is possible that this same fungus had been causing problems with this dinosaur. Now, they didn't actually find that fungus. What they're seeing is the result.
Yeah.
So again, that is jumping to a conclusion, but it is a reasonable conclusion, yes, based on observations
and what we know about
aspergillosis. So, and it is a respiratory infection. In other words, it gets into your body initially through the nose and throat, and then it can spread to other parts of the body from there on.
Sure.
So you get an overall illness. So the dinosaur would have had sort of flu-like symptoms, would have had more like pneumonia, right, inflammation of the lungs. Not a very nice disease. In fact, in its advanced stages, it causes weight loss with a cough and a fever and difficulty in breathing. So pretty unpleasant experience for the dinosaur.
Sure.
So we've had 3 dinosaurs with suffering from paleopathology. And that leads us to think, well, what's happening here? When did this happen? Because the standard story of the history of the world is that it's all been struggle, as Darwin said, you know, the struggle for life, natural selection, survival of the fittest, and disease is part of that process of sorting out the unfit from the fit.
Sure.
Now, we could move on to another creature.
Well, go for it. Yeah. Is this the shark toothache? Yeah, carry on, and then we'll make the important point at the end.
Yes, this is something else that is known to cause a lot of misery, and that's toothache. Now, our teeth are, when they get damaged and diseased, it's pretty bad. But just imagine you were a megalodon shark.
With rows and rows of teeth.
And rows.
It'd just be...
Yes, and what's more, they are enormous teeth. Okay, here's a comparison, and this is from a couple of specimens that we have here in the museum. Megalodon tooth. All right, compared with a modern shark tooth. Now, a modern shark is big enough and has enough teeth, so imagine a megalodon shark with a toothache. That would be a miserable experience whatsoever. Now, what they found was a distortion of the tooth, and here is a picture from their original paper here, and they found what's called a double tooth pathology. Can you see the picture that's right underneath the letter A there? It looks like it's got a split in it. All right, and what they think that is where the tooth has started to grow from tooth buds, right? So tooth-forming tissue, and either that tooth bud has been damaged and split in two, or sometimes you can get 2 teeth buds which have sort of somehow fused together but didn't quite make it, and so they've formed a double tooth or a 2-pronged tooth. Now, this does happen in modern sharks, and so the pictures under C and D there are actually from a modern shark. So this is a known pathology.
It is a real thing, yeah.
So it is a real thing. So megalodon sharks probably suffered this same problem. Now, how does it happen? Well, again, they think this is from trauma. So this is their conclusion. Based on what we see in modern sharks, the injury was most likely caused by chomping down on spiny fish or taking a nasty sting from a stingray barb. Okay. So the standard story is that sharks have always been vicious predators, and they go around eating up, everything in sight, whether it be whales, squid, spiny fish, stingrays, anything that gets in their way, and of course these days the odd diver or surfer or American tourist.
Yes.
Yes. Right. Now, how does this happen? What do they mean by that this was caused by a bite or by a stab with a stingray barb? We have to remember sharks are making teeth all the time. So this could happen any time during the shark's lifetime. Now, this is a reconstruction, of course. It's not a real photo, but you can see the rows of teeth. And what happens is that sharks are constantly growing new teeth, and there's a sort of conveyor belt from from new teeth growing and the old teeth being shed and constantly being replaced. So at any time during the shark's lifetime, it could have had one of those tooth buds damaged. And one of the scientists made an interesting comment. He said, "We think of predator-prey encounters, we tend to reserve our sympathy for the prey."
Poor little bunny being chased by the fox.
That's right. Well, that's fair enough, isn't it? But the life of a predator, even a gigantic megatooth shark, was no cakewalk either.
I like it.
Okay, so this is the Darwinian world, isn't it? Right. In fact, Darwin himself described it as the war of nature.
Struggle with life, yes.
Struggle for life. So that's Darwin's way of explaining how the world got here. Now that's the precise opposite of what the Bible tells us. When God made the world, everything was very good. So would sharks be running around, or swimming around rather, tromping on spiny fish?
Probably not.
Probably not, no.
In fact, certainly not.
Certainly not.
No death or disease.
No death or disease.
Presumably this presents a challenge as well, Diane, for those who want to try and believe in some form of, God using evolution.
Oh, yes.
Because evolution is a process which is millions of years of death and struggle and trouble and issue and stingrays in the mouth and barbs and diseased feet and all the rest of it, right?
That's right, yes.
And it requires this because survival of the fittest means that the unfit die.
Yes.
That's what it really is, right? It's extinction of the unfit.
Yes.
And so if you're trying to fit this real cruel and horrible process of creating things into the Bible, that's the theory of evolution, into the Bible, you've got a massive conflict when God says everything was very good. Because the Bible teaches explicitly that everything started up here, was very good, and ever since man sinned, Adam ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, everything's been going downhill. And we see that evidence in biology, we see that evidence from the fossil record and everything.
Yes.
Yet evolution is the opposite. We're supposed to be going upwards. So these diseased and troubled dinosaurs, these megalodons with the broken teeth, they show a massive issue if you're trying to fit the evolutionary picture of millions of years of death and struggle into scripture. And really it's a challenge to theistic evolutionists. You should be really careful about what you're bringing into scripture.
Yes, that is a serious problem. When did death come into the world? When did disease and struggle come into the world? Now, we definitely have it now, but it's not how God made the world. And in fact, I think it's the most dreadful insult to God to say that he made the world by a process of death, disease and struggle, and then declared it to be very good. When God says something was very good, it really was very good. And we know what good is. Everyone knows what good is, and it doesn't include disease, trauma, death, struggle. I mean, the fact that all of these animals are dead and some of them are extinct shows you the world has definitely gone downhill.
Absolutely.
So yes, that is a serious problem, and it is a real challenge to theistic evolutionists, and to be quite honest, they really need to think things through properly and say, all right, when did all of this disease and struggle come into the world? We're told that. Man sinned, right? Human beings rebelled against their creator. God cursed the ground. So from then on, things have gone downhill, and if you read the rest of Scripture, yes, it's disease, trouble, violence, corruption, all of those things. But those are not what God wanted. Those are the result of the world going downhill, and you're absolutely right. You have two theories which are diametrically opposed. One cannot be symbolic of the other. They are diametrically opposed, and in spite of what some church authorities say, we really do have to choose, and we have to choose the truth. And the truth is what is written by the person who was there right from the beginning, who said the world was very good, but it's gone bad. So opposite of evolution, real history of the world, good, to bad, sadly to worse.
Yes.
It does end in salvation and glory.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen. In fact, you say they're diametrically opposed. They're so blatantly opposed that even the likes of Richard Dawkins, and this is one of the few things we agree with him with, even Richard Dawkins can see that they're opposed. And he says, he admires the creationists for their consistency.
Yes.
But really, I think he called them the old theologians, or the prestigious theologians or whatever, were deluded. He actually used that term. He said, you're deluded if you try and fit evolution into the Bible, because it simply does not work. And we completely agree with him on that point.
Yes, and in fact that was one of the things that led Charles Darwin away from God.
Of course, yes.
He was never really a Christian. He wasn't brought up in the mainstream Christian church.
Full of Victorian hypocrisy at the time.
Victorian hypocrisy. He sent his family to church because that was the cultural right thing to do. He even supported some missionaries because he could see that they had a good effect on the culture of the people that they were ministering to. But he himself did not have any faith. In fact, he turned away from God towards the end of his life. And one of the reasons was that he found it the most terrible offence that a good God would make a world with a process that he literally described of, you can read at the end of the Origin of Species, the war of nature.
Great point. Thanks, Diane. Now for a little personal update. Some of you will have known that my family has been going through a fairly traumatic experience with my sister being diagnosed with aplastic anemia, and many of the issues that is presented with. It's a disease very similar to leukemia. The treatment is essentially the same, and while she's being treated both in the Norfolk and Norwich Hospital and in Addenbrooke's, she has to have transfusions 2 to 3 times a week, and they travel up to 6 hours every day to get her the treatment that she needs. She's on about £5,000 worth of medication each week, so it's pretty full-on stuff. And of course, we do encourage you at Creation Research to not only support us but also support our supporters. So if you go on to creationresearch.net, you'll find ways that you can help support Christian businesses that support us, and you can also find the GoFundMe that was set up by my wife in order to support the family financially, as they are in complete isolation while they're dealing with this. They can't go shopping, they can't go and work, they can't do anything except for stay inside their house and garden, really. So they are in much need. So if you're able to give, if you're able to help, you can obviously support Creation Research with our work and our research, but you can also support the people that are close to us, the supporters who have helped us, and there are many different ways to do that. So down below you should see the link to creationresearch.net and to the latest evidence news, where you can see ways you can support our supporters, and also a direct link to the GoFundMe to support my family and sister there as well. All right, Diane, let's move on to the next topic, skydiving salamanders.
Yes, have you
are these the skydiving salamanders here?
No, there's some skydivers, but they're not salamanders.
Sure.
We normally think of salamanders as little slimy creatures that live in ponds and under rocks.
Yeah,
and,
deep down underground.
Things like that. But we need to talk about skydiving. Have you ever been skydiving?
I have not. It's actually one of the things I would like to do. I wouldn't mind doing it myself, but I'm just getting glares from my wife over the other end of the studio here.
Yes, I'm not sure that I'd really want to jump out of an aeroplane. I actually like flying, but I think I'd
like
to
try
stay
it once for the experience, with somebody else.
Yes, all right. So, skydiving salamanders. Yes, there is a salamander called the wandering salamander, or that's its scientific name down there.
Very well camouflaged, isn't it?
Yes, he is very well camouflaged, because instead of living under rocks or in ponds and other sort of slimy ground-dwelling places, this one lives in a tree.
Oh, fair enough.
Yes. In fact, these things live in some of the tallest trees in the world.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Coastal redwoods. So really huge trees.
Around like that,
That's right. Now, one thing we know about animals that live in trees is that an easy way to get round from one tree to another is not to sort of go down to the bottom and crawl back up again. They jump from one branch to another and from one tree to another. But in order to do that successfully, you have to have some way of controlling the descent. So yes, you are going down, so it's gravity taking over, but you do have to have some way of controlling the descent. So let's go back to the skydivers. Skydivers are famous for sort of holding hands and making these fabulous formations, and they actually have competitions for sort of how many skydivers can link up.
Together, big stack of them and everything.
That's right, yes. But the really clever thing that they can do is by moving their arms and legs and their body orientation, they can control the direction of their flight. So they all jump out of an aeroplane separately, and then they are able to move around in the air while they're going down, so that they can hang on to one another for a short amount of time or for however long, and they can do various manoeuvres. They can turn around and do clever things, and all the time they're going down. So you have controlled descent. And so that's what these salamanders were doing. Someone actually studied these in a vertical wind tunnel.
Those poor salamanders. Getting tossed in.
Yes. Well, I suppose the alternative was climbing up tall
chucking the sciences in the actual wing. Yeah.
That's right. Much easier to capture a few salamanders and take them to the lab. And what they found was, and this is one of the reports from their press release there. These salamanders were not only able to slow themselves down, so that's the point about sort of holding your arms and legs and spreading out. More drag. They were also able to use fine scale control in pitch, roll and yaw. Now those are the three movements that when you're flying, you're in 3 dimensions. Okay, so pitch is for up and down, roll is side to side, and yaw is side to side that way. So in 3 dimensions, and they could maintain an upright body posture and execute banking turns. So like an aeroplane, when it turns right, it goes on its side. So that's a controlled manoeuvre. And glide horizontally. Okay, so that they
completely
they could go sideways. They didn't just fall out of trees like salamander-shaped rocks.
Yeah.
So this is it's not powered flight, but it is a controlled descent.
Sure.
And they made this interesting comment. This level of aerial control was unexpected because these salamanders do not seem to possess conspicuous features for aerial control. Well, neither do people.
No.
but skydivers
are able to do it
to
a
certain extent because they know what to do. Right? So in other words, they knew what to do before they jumped out of an aeroplane. They didn't jump out of an aeroplane and think, now what?
Yes. Already programmed,
already pre-programmed.
Yeah, definitely.
That's important because we need to think, well, how come salamanders could do this? Seeing that most salamanders do live on the ground and don't jump out of trees. What about the ones who did jump out of trees?
Well, that'd be the end of them if they...
That's right. That's an important point. You only get one chance at getting flight right. Okay. So how did they explain this? Classic evolution non-explanation. Right. Selection pressures. Okay, selection pressures imposed on falling from heights can be substantial. Well yes.
Splat.
Yes, that's right. So this is natural selection at work. Yes. And have resulted in the evolution of diverse aerial behaviours among arboreal, that's tree-living texture.
So really they don't give you an answer, they just say basically if you get it wrong it'll kill you, and they've just happened to get it right, but no real explanation as to how they got it right.
Yes, so somehow these things just got it right. But they are just following on from their guru, right, one Charles Darwin, who wrote a book, and everyone thinks it's called The Origin of Species. But if you look at that fine print there, right, and so we've written that all out for you. There we are. They had very long titles in 19th century England. On the origin species by means of natural selection. Now, there's a bit of a problem with that first part of the title to start with. And that doesn't even pass the test of good English.
No.
For an Englishman, that's a bit of a failure.
Yes.
Yes. Or the preservation of favoured races in the struggle for life. So there's the struggle for life. Now, is preservation the same as origin? Because if those two things are meant to say the same thing, they don't. Fails the English test. But even the first part of it, the origin of species by means of natural selection. Now, here is where we mustn't let people bluff us by using words in a technical sense or by using a big word and belting you over the head. So let's look at the words select and selection. All right, just a plain English word. Select simply means to choose between existing alternatives. Right? So selection's not going to create anything because you can't select anything that doesn't exist.
You can't make something new, no.
So it doesn't make new kinds of creatures or give existing creatures some new kind of feature some new function, some new function or some new structure. Select really only eliminates the unfit, right, and allows the already fit kinds to survive. Now, if you think about that in terms of flying creatures, right, natural selection cannot make a non-flying creature into a flying creature, right? So the skydiver, right, unless he knows he's got a parachute at the end of his descent, right, he's going to be selected out.
No matter. No waving of the arms or anything is going to do anything.
That. Yes.
Absolutely.
You cannot make a flying creature out of a non-flying creature by natural selection. All you can do is eliminate the ones that can't fly but thought they could.
Absolutely. Well, it's been exciting times for creation research in terms of some new research that's been going on. We've got some great new Egyptian artefacts, some of which we've been doing with Diane today, and many of which have been reported on in our creation research evidence news, including some brand new opportunities for me to get involved with some rather interesting people and people from the antiquities trade, and of course brand new things that can go on display in our museum project as well. Also, we are doing some new bones, Lord willing. We will be shipping some bones from Australia, some of your wonderful fossil marsupial bones.
Yes, I helped sort those out.
Excellent stuff. In order to try and actually see if we can extract soft, squidgy stuff from soft tissue. It'll be the first report of soft tissue or original biomolecules in ancient bone. This is Pleistocene bone from Australia, from the sort of Antipodean region. So we're really looking forward to doing that. Make sure you watch this space for more updates. But Diane, just remind everybody, how can they actually receive the Creation Research Evidence newsletter as it comes out? Because this is what this broadcast is based off of.
Yes, if you just go to our main website, that's creationresearch.net, there is a link there to newsletters and you can sign up for it. It's free. It just comes out as an email 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And we do archive everything that's on it as individual items. So if you've been missing out, don't worry. And you don't need to know when they were sent out, when the individual items were sent out. They're archived according to their topic, so you can just do a keyword search. But if you would like to get them, as soon as this research has been, we look at it, think about it, put things into a biblical context, help people to work out what was actually discovered versus what was the story that's told about it. If you'd like to get it straight away and find out about ministry news like we've been sharing there, just sign up to it on our website, creationresearch.net, and you'll get your copy every few weeks.
Great stuff. Thanks, Diane. Moving on to our final headline of this broadcast. Parrots defy the forbidden phenotype. And there are some wonderful, beautiful parrots. So the rainbow lorikeets,
Rainbow lorikeets, yes. We have lots of parrots in Australia. One
thing that I was quite jealous about coming through Australia was all the amazing wildlife, but in particular the beautiful parrots and the galahs and rainbow lorikeets and everything that are all over the place there. So, real beautiful birds, aren't they?
Yes, people can't believe that we just have them flying around and landing in our gardens, and flying in the trees in the urban parks and things like that. But we don't have a monopoly on parrots. They do live in lots of other places.
Sure.
But they are very interesting in their agility, and they climb trees. Now, but first of all, we might explain this term forbidden phenotype.
Sure.
All right. Phenotype just means your overall body structure, so it's
Right.
what you see. Okay, so that's another big word, but all it means is body structure. So don't let anyone bluff you about that. Now, forbidden phenotype sounds like, well, that's a body structure that can't happen. And some scientists were looking at the way parrots move around. Mm-hmm. And they made this comment in their scientific paper: no vertebrate, living or extinct, is known to possess an odd number of limbs. So we don't have any sort of three-legged mammals or,
Sure.
or five.
Not naturally, anyway.
Not naturally, anyway. No, that's right. So this has been given the name the forbidden phenotype. In other words, somehow it just can't happen. All right. So despite this forbidden phenotype, gait, that means how things walk or how they move around, using odd numbers of limbs. Okay, so tripedalism 3 or pentapedalism 5
yeah.
feet. Right. Now notice again, evolutionary thinking. If it got there, if we see it, they assume that it evolved. So these things have evolved in both avian, that's birds, and mammalian lineages. So in other words, they are acknowledging that there are some animals, yes, they have an even number, they have 2 legs and maybe 2 front legs, or in the case of birds, they have 2 legs and 2 wings. But they can use other parts of their body to move around. A classic example would be a monkey. Has a prehensile tail, that's right. They can hang from their tail, and they use their tail to move around in trees. And they notice that parrots often climb trees as well as being able to fly. And when they do that, they will stick their beak in the surface of the tree.
Climb, yes.
They'll use their beak to climb. But do they just use it as a sort of stabiliser, or are they literally using their head as another limb?
Yes.
So they carried out some scientific research on this particular parrot here, a rosy-faced love. It's nice, isn't it?
Very lovely.
Very lovely, rosy-faced lovebird, yes. And what they did was to get these birds to climb up a ramp. Mm-hmm. So they trained the birds to climb up a ramp, and they could increase the angle that the ramp was, that the birds were climbing up. So they started off with it flat, so 0 degrees, and then they tested them at different angles, getting further, more and more vertical until you got to 90 degrees.
So completely
So
upright.
completely vertical, right,
Yes.
right, just like climbing up a tree.
Yeah.
Okay. Now they found, and the interesting thing is when you do that in the laboratory, you can actually measure the forces that are being imposed on the ramp. You can do high-speed video camera, and you can actually precisely analyse the movement that's going on there. And when the ramp was lifted up to about 45 degrees, right, the parrots started to use their heads with a fair bit of force, eventually as much force as their legs were exerting, in order to get up this steeper and steeper slope. So they really were using their heads. And they noted that many birds climb vertically. They've seen this happen, but it seems that parrots are the only ones that seem to engage their head as a third limb. Now, it may be that that's because they have a beak that's actually strong enough to put up with the force, but they still have to generate that force. They're not just using it as a stabiliser. They also use their tail, which will make contact with the tree or with the ramp in this case, but the tail is just acting as a sort of stabiliser and a prop. And they went on to say, this behaviour seems to have necessitated neuromuscular changes. In other words, changes in the brain and the spinal cord and the nerve cells and the muscles. But notice where they put their faith. Neuromuscular changes over time. They assume if you leave something long enough, it will change. And they include the neck flexors, that's the muscles that bend the neck, to generate additional forces But it's not just being stronger, you've also got to modify the spinal neural circuitry. So that means the spinal cord, there are nerve cells in there with built-in circuits that make the movement coordinated, because it's not enough to be strong. Movements have to be coordinated to be useful in order to go up. Otherwise, you're just sort of going to grab hold of the tree and get stuck.
Sure.
So there is an important challenge to evolution here again. It's not enough simply to have a new structure add on. It has to be integrated into the rest of the body, and these scientists are actually acknowledging this, right? You need the nervous system control, you need the muscle coordination in order for it to be useful. Now they assume that, well, maybe in the past some parrots tried to climb trees and tried to use their heads, and for some reason or other over time all of these things came into being. But again, like selection, time cannot make new processes either. New structures.
We're definitely looking at evidence of design here.
So
it's design.
It's design. All of those things have to be in place in the first place for this to work. The parrot has to know that it's going to work. How many parrots tried to walk up a vertical tree,
breaking their neck or falling off before they,
because their muscles and their nerves just weren't strong enough, or didn't have the control.
I think there's also a tendency to anthropomorphize evolution, because evolution is a concept. It's just an interpretation. It's a way of thinking about things, and yet it's almost like they attribute, especially when you watch like the BBC Attenborough documentaries. They'll go, evolution has done this. Evolution decided. It's almost like they give evolution a personality that can pre-think. If I'm going to climb this tree, I need to evolve big, thick back muscle stuff, right? And really, we're not dealing with that at all. It's impossible to design this just by simply giving long enough time.
No, that's right. Design is the product of a mind, of forethought, of clever manipulation.
Yeah.
And that is an important point. So just as much with flying creatures, with climbing creatures, the same thing. New structures require new brain, nerve and muscle control before they're of any use.
Sure.
Time is not going to make any of those.
And that's a key thing as well with the dinosaur to bird evolution argument, right? You're trying to turn what appears to be a reptile, from all that we know about it, you're trying to turn a reptile into a warm-blooded bird. And yes, okay, scales are made of keratin and feathers are made of keratin, but trying to turn one to the other, it's a completely new structure. It's like, so, and to turn a dinosaur, you'd need a new brain, new nerve, new muscle, an entire new morphology, entire new phenotype. It just would not happen. It won't make it by itself.
That's right. And it doesn't matter how much time you have, it's not going to happen. In fact, we know that things just go downhill over time. Again, goes back to that good to bad to worse. Our observations are that with time, things degenerate within our own lifetimes and over long periods of time as well. We have more animals in the fossil record than we have now, so extinct creatures. So time doesn't make new things. Time, in fact, is the enemy of evolution, in spite of the fact that they keep on putting their faith in it.
Yeah, time doesn't create things, process does.
That's right.
And you need a very good process to design what we see today. And of course, that goes back to Jesus Christ, who is the creator of all.
That's right, indeed. You have to have the right physical and chemical processes and the right mind to be able to apply those to the matter and energy that was made in the first place. So there is, remember the forbidden phenotype was tripedalism or pentapedalism. Well, actually, we have a forbidden phenotype down under, right? Remember the kangaroo?
Oh, yes.
Right. Yes. This is our favourite forbidden phenotype down under, as well as the parrots. And we have written about this in the newsletter quite a few years ago when the original study on this was done. Look at the kangaroo at the front there. Can you see how it's got its tail firmly planted on the ground? Now, when they want to move fast, of course, they hop on two legs. But when they're just cruising around on the ground, ambling along, what they do is they plant their tail on the ground between their legs, and then they will lift up both of their legs and just swing them forward.
Swing forward on the tail,
Right,
yeah.
on the tail, so, and use their forelimbs as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4 plus the tail. So another forbidden phenotype. So it's not forbidden at all. It's a piece of really clever design.
And the design word is the key.
It is indeed.
Well, that brings us onto our final news item, which is Glenn Wilson, the Dirt Doc, a new guy from Creation Research USA, who's kind of taken on our work and taken on Creation Research's work over in the USA at the moment. And he's doing a great job, isn't he?
Oh, yes,
Absolutely
he is.
brilliant.
Yes, he's a sedimentologist by profession. Studies flowing water and mud. When I was first introduced to them when they came to visit Australia, they were living in a place in Mississippi, and they said, yes, we're from Mississippi, straight from the swamp. So
Great stuff.
Experts in mud and sediment.
Yeah, but Glenn's a great guy, him and his wife Ruby and the whole family. In fact, I've had a great pleasure of spending a lot of time with them, and Lord willing, I'll be spending more time with them when we can get back into the States and do some more. However, until then, get in touch with Creation Research USA. He is around, he is speaking, he is visiting churches, and he's doing radio shows. In fact, he recently did a series of radio shows with a local radio based in Tennessee. I was a guest on one of those shows. You were a guest on one of the shows.
Been on one of them.
Our very own John Mackay was a guest on one of the shows, and all of these are available, obviously local if you live in Tennessee, but if you go to, all the links will obviously be in the description below, but if you go to the creationresearchcenter.com or click on the link in the description below, you will be able to go and listen to all 5 of the radio broadcasts, and I'll see if I can remember them all now. Canyons, coal, caves, creatures and crust. 5 different times I get it right. 5 different topics, obviously canyons, Grand Canyon, caves, the deep caves, coal, the formation. I think John did that one.
Yes.
And I think John also spoke about canyons as well.
Yes, that's right.
Crust is obviously his speciality, sediments and soil.
Yes.
I did creatures alongside with you.
Yes.
You dealt with some of the living things. I dealt with some of the dead things, the living fossils and the like. But a whole great range of programs. So go and check that out. Also get in touch with Creation Research USA, get behind and support them over there, as well as here in the UK and in Australia. Well, that brings us to the end of our headlines and to the end of this broadcast in general. So it's been absolutely wonderful, Diane, to be able to have you with us and engage like this and keep an eye out for some of the things that we've been doing with Diane, whole broadcast shows and get behind, support the ministry as well. As usual, all of the links are in the description below. Our questions featured in the last 2 Creation Research Evidence News broadcasts are also in the description. All the references are in the description below. All the links for the things that we've mentioned are in the description below, as well as ways that you can support us and donate to us, and we thank you very much for that. Be sure you subscribe to Creation Research Evidence News. It comes out every few weeks and it is free. Gives you up-to-date information as well as news as to what's going on with the ministry. Until next time, when I suspect, Diane, we will be back to normal in different parts of the world, but you're actually planning on coming back to the UK at some point.
I'm hoping to come back in the autumn, yes, because we have a wonderful fossil week coming up.
Absolutely. You'll be there, I'll be there. It'll be absolutely wonderful. So to be sure to catch us at the Rocks Cry Out convention. Again, more details online, all the details below. But until next time, it is goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
We will catch you next time.